Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with the question for a moment before we go any further. When was the last time you woke up feeling genuinely strong? Not just rested, strong. That specific feeling of waking up with energy already in your body, your mind clear, your physical presence solid and reliable. The kind of morning that used to just happen, without you having to think about it or hope for it. If that feeling has become less frequent, if mornings have quietly become something you endure rather than something that sets the tone for a good day, I want you to know that you are not alone. And I want you to know that what you're experiencing has a biological explanation that is far more specific and far more addressable than most men ever get told. I'm Dr. Fernanda Oliveira, board certified urologist, and this channel is where I have honest conversations with men over 50 and 60 about the things that matter most to their health, their confidence, and their quality of life. No shame, no judgment, and no reaching immediately for a prescription as the only available answer. Just real clinical knowledge translated into things you can actually use. Today, I want to talk specifically to the men over 60, because while the changes I'm going to describe can begin in your 50s, something often shifts more noticeably in the decade after that. The mornings that used to feel strong begin to feel ordinary. Then ordinary begins to feel like a generous description. Morning erections, which are not just an intimate detail, but are actually one of the clearest indicators of vascular and hormonal health that the male body produces, become less frequent, less firm, or disappear from the morning routine altogether. Energy upon waking feels thin. The gap between who you were at 50 and who you are now starts to feel wider than you expected. My dear friend, there is no reason to feel embarrassed about any of this. Millions of men just like you are waking up to these exact same mornings, carrying this exact same quiet frustration, and the vast majority of them have been told, either directly or by the silence of the medical system around this topic, that this is simply what 60 looks like, that this is the deal, that you accept it and move on. I am here to respectfully and emphatically disagree with that, because what I see in my practice, consistently, over 15 years of working with men in this age group, is that the body at 60 is far more responsive to the right support than most people give it credit for. The decline you're experiencing is real. I'm not going to minimize it or tell you it's imaginary. But real does not mean irreversible, and the specific biological mechanisms behind it are ones we can actually address, with simple, affordable, daily habits that most men have never been told about. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about what is actually happening inside your body that produces these weaker mornings, because understanding the mechanism is the first step to changing the outcome. After 60, three interconnected systems begin to work less efficiently than they once did, and all three of them converge on the same experience, that feeling of a diminished morning. The first is hormone production. Testosterone, which is produced primarily during deep sleep, begins to decline gradually from the mid-30s onward, but by the 60s, that cumulative decline becomes genuinely significant for many men. The second is vascular function. The blood vessels that supply tissue throughout the body, including the specialized erectile tissue that depends entirely on strong, responsive circulation, become less flexible, less reactive, and less efficient at delivering blood where it needs to go. And the third is nutrient absorption. The gut, as it ages, becomes measurably less efficient at extracting certain key minerals from food, minerals that the hormonal and vascular systems depend on to function properly. These three things do not happen independently of each other. They are deeply interconnected, and they reinforce each other in ways that accelerate the overall effect. Lower testosterone affects sleep architecture, which reduces the body's ability to produce testosterone, which worsens sleep further. Declining vascular function reduces circulation to tissues that need it, which impairs recovery, which further reduces vascular responsiveness. And nutrient deficiencies, particularly in minerals like magnesium, which I'm going to spend significant time on in a moment, undermine both the hormonal and the vascular systems simultaneously. I want to use an analogy here that I think captures this well. Think of your body's vitality systems at 60 like a classic car that hasn't had consistent maintenance for a few years. The engine still works, the car still runs, but the oil is a little old. The fuel lines have some buildup, the pressure in the cooling system isn't quite what it should be. The car gets you where you're going, but it doesn't perform the way it did when everything was running cleanly and the right fluids were at the right levels. Now, take that same car, give it a proper service, flush the lines, put in fresh oil, restore the system pressures, and suddenly it moves differently. The response is there again. The power comes back. Not because you rebuilt the engine from scratch, because you gave an already capable system what it needed to function the way it was designed to. That is exactly the kind of recovery I'm talking about for men over 60. Not rebuilding from zero, supporting a system that is still fundamentally capable but has been running without the right inputs for too long. Now, let me focus specifically on morning erections because I think they deserve more direct attention than they typically receive. Many men notice their absence and feel embarrassed by it or assume it's purely a sign of lost desire or diminished masculinity. I want to correct that completely. Morning erections, the medical term is nocturnal penile tumescence, are not primarily about desire. They are the body's automatic vascular maintenance system. During REM sleep, which occurs in cycles throughout the night, the body increases blood flow to erectile tissue. This isn't sexual in origin. It is physiological. It is the body testing and maintaining the circulation and nerve pathways that serve that tissue, the same way your heart continues beating and your lungs continue working while you sleep. It is automatic. It is biological. And its presence or absence tells you something genuinely important about the state of your vascular and hormonal health. When morning erections are strong and consistent, they indicate that overnight circulation is working well, that testosterone production during sleep is adequate, and that the nerve pathways serving that tissue are intact and responsive. When they become weak or infrequent, the body is communicating, in the clearest language it has, that something in that overnight system is not functioning as it should. It is not a verdict on your masculinity. It is information. And information, unlike a verdict, can be acted on. So, what is most commonly disrupting that overnight system in men over 60? In my clinical experience, one factor shows up with remarkable consistency, and it is one that is almost never the first thing discussed when men bring these concerns to their doctors. That factor is magnesium deficiency. I know that might sound surprisingly mundane for something with such significant consequences, but the science here is genuinely compelling, and once you understand the role magnesium plays in the specific systems we've been discussing, it stops seeming mundane very quickly. Magnesium is involved in more than 300 enzymatic processes in the human body. For our purposes today, 3 of those roles matter most. First, magnesium is essential for the relaxation of smooth muscle tissue, including the smooth muscle that lines the walls of your blood vessels. When magnesium levels are sufficient, those vessels dilate more readily in response to the signals they receive. When magnesium is low, vascular responsiveness decreases. Circulation becomes less efficient, and the blood flow that morning erections depend on becomes harder to generate and sustain. Second, magnesium plays a direct role in regulating sleep architecture. It supports the transition into deep, slow-wave sleep, which is precisely the stage where testosterone production is concentrated. Men with low magnesium often report lighter, more fragmented sleep, more frequent waking, less sense of genuine restoration in the morning, without ever identifying the mineral deficiency as the cause. They assume they're just aging into lighter sleep, and sometimes that assumption costs them years of recovery that they could have had. Third, and this one surprises people, magnesium is involved in testosterone metabolism itself. It doesn't produce testosterone, but it supports the biochemical pathways through which testosterone is synthesized and regulated. Adequate magnesium creates a more favorable hormonal environment during sleep. Deficient magnesium creates a less favorable one. Now, here is the part that I find most clinically striking. Research consistently shows that magnesium deficiency is present in a significant proportion of adults over 60. And the reason it's so common in this age group specifically is twofold. The modern diet, even a reasonably healthy one, often delivers less magnesium than optimal due to decades of changes in agricultural soil quality. And the aging gut absorbs magnesium from food less efficiently than a younger gut does. So you can be eating a diet that would have met your needs at 40, and by 60, that same diet is leaving you meaningfully deficient, with no obvious symptoms to alert you. One of my patients, a man in his early 60s, came to me certain that his fatigue and declining morning vitality were simply the inevitable face of his age. He was otherwise healthy, he exercised, he ate reasonably well. He had accepted the situation with the quiet resignation of a man who'd been told there was nothing specific to address. When we looked more carefully at his nutritional picture and began correcting his magnesium levels as part of a broader evening routine, the change in his sleep quality was noticeable within 2 weeks. The change in his mornings followed shortly after. He came back and said something I hear in variations from patients regularly, that he felt like his body had been given back something it had been missing for a long time, and he hadn't even known it was gone. That feeling is available to you. That recovery is possible. And the pathway to it begins with something you do every evening before you sleep. A simple, warm, 2-minute ritual that supports your vascular system, your mineral levels, and your overnight hormonal recovery simultaneously. I'm going to give you the complete recipe and the full evening routine in just a moment. But before I do, I need to walk you through 2 mistakes that I see men over 60 make constantly. Mistakes that look completely harmless from the outside, but that quietly dismantle the very recovery process we're trying to support. And one of them involves something almost every man in this age group does in the evening without a second thought, never suspecting that it's working directly against the strong mornings he's hoping to reclaim. Stay with me, we're almost there. All right, let's finish this properly, because everything we've built together in this conversation, the vascular science, the sleep architecture, the magnesium connection, the biology of morning erections, all of it was leading here, to the part where you walk away with something concrete, something you can do tonight, something that costs almost nothing and asks very little of you except consistency and a willingness to take your own recovery seriously. But the mistakes first, because I have watched too many men over 60 invest genuine effort into improving their health and see disappointing results. Not because their bodies weren't capable of responding, but because 2 specific habits were quietly canceling out everything they were trying to build. And both of them are so normalized, so woven into the daily routine, that most men never think to question them. The first mistake is one that will probably surprise you less than the second, but it's worth spending real time on because the details matter, and most men only have a vague understanding of why this is a problem. I'm talking about caffeine consumed too late in the day. Coffee after lunch, tea in the evening, an energy drink in the mid-afternoon that seemed harmless because it wasn't close to bedtime. Here is what most men don't appreciate about caffeine. It has a half-life of 5 to 6 hours in the average adult body. And that half-life actually lengthens somewhat as we age, meaning that at 60, caffeine stays active in your system longer than it did at 40. If you drink a cup of coffee at 2 in the afternoon, a meaningful amount of that caffeine is still circulating in your bloodstream at 8 or 9 in the evening. It isn't keeping you awake in any obvious way. You might fall asleep without difficulty, but it is reducing the depth of your sleep cycles. It is suppressing the slow wave, deep sleep stages where testosterone production is concentrated. It is elevating cortisol at a time of night when cortisol should be at its lowest. And it is doing all of this invisibly, without you feeling any direct sensation of stimulation, which is exactly why it's so easy to overlook as a contributing factor. The practical recommendation is simple. Move your caffeine cutoff to no later than early afternoon, 2 o'clock at the absolute latest, and earlier if you can manage it. This one adjustment, for many of my patients, produces a noticeable improvement in sleep depth within the first week. Not because I've given them anything new, but because I've removed something that was actively working against them every single night. The second mistake is subtler, and in my experience, it's the more consequential one for men in this age group specifically. It's the absence of intentional evening movement. A sedentary evening followed directly by sleep. Think about what most evenings look like for a man over 60. Dinner, often a reasonably large meal, then the couch. Television, perhaps reading, perhaps time on a phone or tablet. Sitting for 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours before bed, and then sleep. And this feels natural because the body is tired, the day has been long, and rest feels earned and appropriate. But here is what's happening physiologically during those sedentary evening hours that quietly undermines nighttime recovery. Blood sugar rises after dinner and, without movement to help metabolize it, stays elevated for longer than it should. Circulation in the lower body, in the pelvis, the legs, the very region we've been discussing, becomes stagnant. The parasympathetic nervous system, which is the branch responsible for rest, digestion, and sexual function, struggles to fully activate because the body is still carrying the residual tension and cortisol load of the day without any physical release. And the vascular system enters the night in a tighter, less responsive state than it would if even minimal movement had been introduced in the preceding hours. A 10-minute walk after dinner changes all of this. Not dramatically, not immediately, but consistently and cumulatively over time. It stabilizes blood sugar. It drives fresh circulation through the pelvic region. It lowers cortisol. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and it tells the body in a very direct physical language that the transition from day to night has begun and that the conditions for genuine recovery are being prepared. 10 minutes. That is a completely manageable ask, and the return it produces in sleep quality and morning vitality over weeks and months is disproportionately large relative to the investment. Now, the drink. 1 cup of warm water, 1 teaspoon of raw honey, half a teaspoon of ground ginger, half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon, true cinnamon, not the cassia variety that fills most supermarket shelves, because the distinction matters biochemically. And if you enjoy it, a small squeeze of fresh lemon for its mild circulatory and digestive benefits. Stir everything together. Take 200 to 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate alongside it. The glycinate forms specifically because it's absorbed efficiently, and the glycine it's bound to adds its own gentle calming effect on the nervous system. Drink it slowly, 30 to 45 minutes before you go to bed, 4 to 5 nights per week. Let me walk through each ingredient one final time, not because you need convincing, but because men who understand what they're putting into their body and why are the men who stay consistent. And consistency is everything here. Raw honey provides your liver with the natural sugars it needs to maintain stable glycogen stores through the night. When those stores run low in the early morning hours, your body raises cortisol to compensate, which disrupts sleep and suppresses the testosterone production that should be occurring during those final sleep cycles before you wake. 1 teaspoon of raw honey before bed is a small, precise intervention that keeps that process quiet and lets your hormonal recovery run its full course undisturbed. Ginger supports vascular function through its active compounds, gingerols and shogals, which help reduce vascular inflammation and improve the responsiveness of blood vessel walls. Many men describe a gentle warmth moving through their body after drinking this, particularly into the extremities, and that sensation is a direct reflection of improved peripheral circulation doing exactly what it should. For men over 60 whose circulation has been quietly declining for years, this effect is not cosmetic. It is the body beginning to function more efficiently at a tissue level. Ceylon cinnamon works on insulin sensitivity, improving the efficiency with which your cells process blood sugar overnight. This keeps your metabolic environment stable during sleep, prevents the hormonal disruptions that blood sugar instability can trigger, and creates the clean biochemical backdrop against which testosterone production and vascular repair can proceed without interference. Think of it as clearing the road so the repair crew can actually get to work. And magnesium glycinate brings everything together. It relaxes smooth muscle throughout the body, including the vessel walls. It deepens sleep architecture. It supports testosterone metabolism. And taken consistently over weeks, it begins to correct the underlying deficiency that has likely been quietly limiting your overnight recovery for longer than you realize. Now let me give you the full evening as a complete picture, because the sequence matters as much as the individual pieces. Aim to finish dinner 2 to 3 hours before sleep. After dinner, your 10-minute walk, comfortable pace, outside if possible, just enough to activate circulation and begin lowering the cortisol load of the day. Come home. Let the environment around you quiet down. Dim the lights if you're able, because light exposure in the evening suppresses melatonin and delays the onset of deep sleep. Step away from screens 30 to 45 minutes before bed. I know this is the instruction everyone gives and almost nobody follows completely, but even a partial reduction in screen time during that window makes a measurable difference in sleep depth. About 40 minutes before bed, prepare your drink. Sit with it somewhere comfortable. Take your magnesium alongside it. Breathe slowly. Let your nervous system complete the transition from the alertness of the day into genuine rest. And then sleep at a consistent time for 7 to 8 hours. I want to say something about that consistency of bedtime specifically, because it matters more than most men appreciate. Your body operates on a circadian rhythm, an internal clock that governs when cortisol rises, when melatonin peaks, when testosterone production initiates, when growth hormone is released. When you go to bed at the same time each night, that clock becomes precise and reliable. The repair systems activate on schedule. The hormonal peaks land in the right sleep stages, and the morning that follows reflects the quality of the recovery that preceded it. When bedtime varies significantly, some nights 10 o'clock, other nights midnight or later, that clock becomes imprecise. The systems activate out of sequence, and even if total sleep hours are adequate, the quality of the recovery is meaningfully reduced. Consistent bedtime is one of the most powerful and most underutilized interventions available to men over 60, and it costs nothing except the decision to prioritize it. Now I want to tell you what to expect, because setting the right expectations is what determines whether someone commits to this long enough to actually experience the results. The first thing most men notice is sleep, usually within the first 1 to 2 weeks. A deeper quality to the night, fewer wakings, a more genuine sense of restoration in the morning. That shift in sleep quality is significant on its own, but it's also the foundation on which everything else is built. Better sleep means better testosterone production. Better testosterone means better energy, better mood, better vascular function, and better mornings. The improvements in morning vitality, in the strength and frequency of morning erections specifically, tend to follow the sleep improvements by several weeks. Most of my patients in this age group begin reporting meaningful changes somewhere between the 3rd and 6th week of consistent practice. Not dramatic overnight transformation, gradual, progressive, reliable improvement that compounds over time. One of my patients, a man in his mid-60s who had nearly stopped expecting strong mornings altogether, came back after about 5 weeks and described the experience with a simplicity that I found genuinely moving. He said his mornings felt like his again. Not like a younger man's mornings, like his. The version of himself he recognized and trusted. That is the goal. Not turning back the clock. Reclaiming your own baseline. The version of you that is available when your body has the right support. I want to be clear one final time. Everything I share on this channel is offered as educational information drawn from genuine clinical experience and the best available research, but it is not a substitute for individualized medical evaluation. If you are experiencing significant symptoms, sudden changes, pain, or anything that concerns you, please see a qualified urologist. Your individual situation deserves individual attention. For everyone else, for the man over 60 who woke up this morning feeling less than he expected and who is ready to do something about it, tonight is where it starts. Go to the comments right now and type the words, "I'm trying this tonight." Say it. Commit to it. Because the men who say it out loud are the men who follow through. And the men who follow through are the ones who come back weeks later with a different kind of morning to report. And if this conversation gave you something useful today, if something clicked, if a connection was made that hadn't been made before, please subscribe to this channel. Every week, I bring honest, practical, clinically grounded guidance to help men over 50 and 60 stay strong, stay vital, and stay fully present in their own lives. Your body is listening. It is waiting for the right signal. Give it that signal tonight and give it enough time to respond. I'll see you in the next one, my friend.